What's up, everybody? It is I, your nuclear barbarian, Emmett Penny, and I am here to bring you another episode. I'm really excited for this one because I get to talk to somebody I've wanted to talk to for quite some time. Today's guest is Angelica Oung of the Taipei Times, I believe. Correct?
Correct, correct. Although I am speaking here very much as an individual and nothing to do with my organization.
That is correct.
Just
In
want
fact,
to
we will not
make
even
that
be
clear.
talking. Yeah, we won't even be talking about an article from the Taipei Times.
I'm doing good. Yeah, it's another beautiful day in Taiwan. It's finally not super hot anymore. We've had a bear of a summer. That basically it started getting hot in May, and we had two blackouts because everybody cranked that AC. Without air conditioning, Taiwan is basically uninhabitable. Yeah, but
Wow.
finally, it's going to be nice for maybe another 2 weeks, and then it might get damp and rainy. We'll see how it goes this winter.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm really excited to talk to you about the energy crunch in China, which is going to be sort of like our main topic today. But before that, I wanted to introduce you a little bit to the readers. How did you come to cover energy issues?
Well, actually, the short answer is I was a COVID refugee.
Hmm.
Actually, before COVID, Valentine's Day 2020, I was actually the pastry chef at Michelin rated Hinoki and the Bird in LA. And
No
that was going to
way.
be my path. And I felt like I had clawed my way up to the middle. And when my brother told me to come back to Taiwan for COVID, I literally thought, okay, I'll be back in a couple of months because this seems kind of gnarly. I'm going to sit this one out. And, plan A was I literally got a 60-day supply of ramen and 6 bottles of good whiskey. and when it seemed like it was going to be too serious for plan A, plan B was Taiwan. But I fully intended to return. It became increasingly unlikely. And finally, around July, I bit the bullet and accepted that COVID was going to be a huge thing, and went back to my old job at my old employer and started covering journalism again. And as a reporter in an English language newspaper, your beats are huge. So I actually cover everything from downstream tech from Honghai, called Foxconn in the US,
Hmm.
and all the way up to state-run companies and Ministry of Economic Affairs and energy. I cover Thai Power and I cover renewable energy. And for some reason, maybe because I just can't get excited about how the iPhone 13 is different from the iPhone 12.
That doesn't do
To
it for
me,
you?
they look like the same phone.
Yeah, yeah.
But drawn to energy in this way where I just really understand that it's important to people's lives for Taiwan. And it also had a lot of interesting technological things to understand and sort of integrate into. It hit all the levels for me because it's politics,
Hmm.
it's technology, it's engineering, it's money. It's really just the
It's
lifeblood of
power.
the economy. Power is power, to quote my
Hmm.
favorite Game of Thrones character.
Yeah.
Power is power. And so I was drawn to that, and there were a lot of stories to cover from the burgeoning renewables industry that was basically spoken into being by the President Tsai, when she came into office in 2016. She announced very ambitious renewable energy goals and for nuclear to go to zero by 2025. Yeah.
Wow. That is a fast track into energy stuff.
I know it was like, really, I don't make 5-year plans anymore. I make 1-year plans.
Yeah.
And,
No, I hear
if
you.
things keep going this way, I might start just making 6-month plans. But yeah, it's been a wild ride, and I can't think of a topic I'd rather cover from whatever angle, because you just don't think about it, do you, as a consumer of electricity? I've
Hmm.
been an electricity enjoyer ever since I was a baby.
Yeah.
And I've never thought of it as anything more than you turn on a switch and magic, the light comes on, right? And I had no idea of this delicate dance of supply and demand that has to go on in the background to make sure that magic reliability happens all the time. And I'm a big fan of keeping it that way. I'm a big fan of keeping the average electricity consumer completely oblivious to how much work goes on to making sure that happens.
No, absolutely. It's funny. I didn't expect to end up in the energy world either. When I was probably in my early 20s, I thought I was going to, in my delusions of grandeur, that I'd already be a famous American poet by now. That's definitely not how anything panned out. But
well, you could be the most famous American poet and probably still have to, I don't know, like at a Starbucks or something, which is unfortunate. I mean, I love poetry, and I wish it had the reverence. I think we would all be better people if we read more poetry, but it's one of those weird things where it doesn't seem to have a slot in our modern life.
No, I remember talking to this American poet, Nick Flynn, and he said, poetry is the only thing that devalues the piece of paper you printed on. But I think, like you, once I started paying attention to energy, you almost just like get hooked. Like you just want to know more and more and go deeper and deeper, because its explanatory power is so revelatory, because it's the edifice of our modern lives.
Absolutely. And it's also one of those unfortunate things where I really got hooked into power in Taiwan, because it's dysfunctional. It's where the story is. And as a journalist, you really gravitate towards that. And especially when problems and you feel like people aren't really talking about it or not enough, then that's when you really start to pay attention. And I'm not to say that it's all negative, but the energy policy is so ambitious, and the movement away from nuclear energy is going to be so hard to make up for, that this is a story I'll be watching for the next few years easily.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll probably touch on some of that as we go along. I wanted to talk to you about this wonderful article you wrote for Citywire Asia. Yeah, China faces a cruel and dirty energy winter. I love the title. I was wondering if you could give us the broad strokes, just to start, of what is going on in China, because it seems pretty freaky from where I'm sitting here in Los Angeles.
Yeah, you don't expect of a planned economy, right? I think it's around the middle of September when power just started going out unannounced, or maybe you might get a notice the night before, for industrial users. And in the very, very beginning, they were trying to spin it as, well, we are just that serious about our ESG goals. We're just that serious about decarbonization that we are just cracking down on these dirty, dirty industries. But that story kind of went out of the window the moment the consumer electricity supply is touched, because you just don't do that. You had people eating their dinners by the light, by candlelight, not in a romantic way. Okay?
Right. You said there was a run on candles.
Actually, there were. People were just stocking up on candles until they, couldn't buy them online anymore. You had ridiculous things happening. You had people being helped off the platform because their train couldn't pull in the platform properly before the electricity stopped. Wow. You had traffic lights stopping. In the most ridiculous video I saw, and it's like truly a testament to the adaptability of the Chinese people, there was this lady who was in the middle of getting a perm when the power went out. And they pushed her out to the local garage, and because the local garage had a generator, she finished her perm there in the garage.
Wow.
Yeah, so when you had people being affected in that way, and winter coming up, and winters in China, in the north of China, being very cruel, very brutal. Yeah, you had some big problems. It signals some big problems. And basically what happened was a 180-degree change in policy.
Mm-hmm.
And they went from stamping out all the marginal coal producers and trying to crush corruption and trying to do ESG. I think they were actually kind of sincere about it,
Mm-hmm.
trying to keep the skies blue for Beijing 2022. All that went out the window, and it became like turn on every last suspect Mongolian coal mine that has been working for however many years. Let's turn it all back on. We just need the black stuff because when people get cold, they get rioty in Taiwan.
Yeah.
Sorry, in China. I mean, I think we have this very here in the West. We have this view of the grand public in China as being very placid and completely under the whip of the CCP.
Right.
But let me tell you, the CCP are that strict on them because they are scared of the power of the public and public opinion. And when the public, when people rebel in the onesies and twosies, they are crushed brutally, whatever. But when the people rise up at some mass where there's an instigating incident where they all get mad at once, that's the CCP's worst nightmare.
Yeah.
And we had a bunch of cold people in the middle of the winter
with nothing else left to lose. Yeah.
And they know this. It's interesting because you can actually also go back to the energy shortages of the past, and this has happened in a more localized way. And it's like public has its own intelligence, and they know how to stand up together. And they have these like giant banners that they all hold a little piece of, so nobody's really in charge. And it's just like, give us our electricity or warm our homes, please. And, there'll be kind of polite messages like, please, dear central government, make sure that we're warm this winter or something like that. And everybody is carrying a piece of that banner. It's like, who's the ringleader? Who's the instigator? Who do you punish? You can't punish them all.
Right. That's fascinating. So, I mean, that seems like very perilous territory to have entered into. I'm interested in what you said about sort of the different facets of this. So we had a push for renewables, which, like the rest of the world, didn't deliver. Who knows the extent of their sincerity about ESG? They did commit to certain things. And part of that, you said, was cracking down on corruption involved with marginal coal producers. So what's that about?
Well, let's say the coal mines in China, coal has a way of falling off the back of the truck. And a lot of people got really, really wealthy off that. And, I don't want to think of him as an evil guy or a good guy in this equation. He's a guy with
just a political actor. Yeah.
He's a political actor, and he's like, my hand cannot stretch there. These guys have their own little fiefdoms and they're enriching themselves in a way that makes me look bad. I'm going to crack the whip on them. And the problem is sometimes when you stamp out corruption, you also stamp out productivity. This is one of the hard lessons I've really had to deal with because I think when you're away from, when you're just doing your job and your job doesn't involve any corruption, and you get ahead if you do well, you don't. It's very easy to be super sanctimonious about corruption and how it's, you should have zero tolerance for it. But in certain systems that are not functional in other ways, corruption is how things get done because it's a backdoor way of incentivizing people to make sure that things are working right. So
and it's relationships, it's guarantees, it's its own trust network, and it has accountability all its own.
It's weird. It's like it's a dark world, but at the same time, if you're skimming off this plan, and I don't know, 15% is going in your pocket, you're gonna be there, and you're incentivized to make sure that the coal's coming out, that machineries are working, and everything's like, functioning because you have your pipeline, right? You have your incentive. It might not be the incentive we would wish market liberals, but it's also what we should expect as market liberals. in the absence of an incentive, things don't work. And that's kind of exactly what we saw. And so they're like, okay, we're going to do this corruption crackdown. And as a result, all these coal mines close. And some canny investors noticed that. They picked that up really early on. Like, China's going to have a coal problem. Guys, let's some of them made a killing, honestly. It's damn obscene. But, good for them. They saw an opportunity and they took it.
Yeah, they saw the play. Yeah.
But I actually think that we should go one step further, because as I also wrote in my article, sure, you have all these proximate causes to the perfect storm. Isn't it interesting how blackouts are always described as the perfect storm? Usually not just one factors, and so it is in this case.
Yeah, it's a complex system, so a lot of things have to go wrong to get rid of redundancies.
And usually it's one of those things where nobody's stupid enough to risk a blackout. So they build in a little bit of margin.
Yeah.
And the thing is, if you have all these different factors you have to rely on, and each one of them have built in an acceptable margin, somehow, just because you have too many factors going on, the chances, it's like throwing more and more dice, but somehow, it's all going to come up snake eyes one of those times. And this is what happened. Like, okay, you have Mongolian crackdown, you have ESG, but I think if you really, really, really want to dig down, what is the reason? It's because China's coal power plants were only half liberalized, meaning they were subject to floating price of coal. So when coal is expensive, they just have to eat at that price. But the price of their electricity output was capped by China, because they, this is the big problem, by the way, China is going to have to overcome in the coming years, because it doesn't work to have a half liberalized system. It doesn't work if you have a power plant where you mandate what they can earn on their output, but you let them twist in the wind on absorbing the cost of their input. So when coal went up,
no one's gonna stand for that.
300%. Hey, you can't even make them keep producing. People find a way not to produce that power. And so there's those dramatic footage I saw of all these enormous storehouses of coal, absolutely empty. It's eerie. And they did that because for every kilowatt hour of electricity they produced, they lost. So they simply didn't produce. It was, again, kind of like that, if you're the one dissenter who spoke up and said, Chairman Xi, I think your policy sucks, and us coal producers are not gonna be able to survive, then he would have been squashed like a bug. But if all these power producers all at once, maybe not even coordinated, but they just all stopped producing power, that put enormous pressure on the Chinese government, and something got done really, really, really quickly. I believe it was within 2 weeks, they already allowed a certain amount of float for the price of the electricity. Soon it was more and more, and I don't think it's going to go back. I think the price of electricity, the end of the era of price stability for power in China is kind of over. It's going to be really hard to get it to go back again.
Right. They've sort of crossed the Rubicon on that one. It can't be the same after what's happening. So I'm interested in how the Chinese energy system is set up, right? And like what we mean when we say liberalized, because I've seen a lot of different definitions of that, especially when we're talking energy and power, right? So in America, often when we say we're going to liberalize it, what we mean is we're going to set up like the regional transmission organization, wholesale, auction house style energy grid. Is that what you mean here, or do you mean something else?
It's really a little bit, no, not the American style. The Chinese power producers, the power plants,
Hmm.
they're still like, I don't know, state-owned organizations or something like that.
Vertically
You
integrated. Yeah.
you don't have. I don't think you've gotten to the point of decadence, like in the UK, where you had like octopus glow,
Right, right.
sparkle. I don't know.
Yeah, all the
all the
different, yeah.
all the sort of power companies
Hmm.
that are really just like the thinnest layer
Yeah.
over the
That are all
stock
dropping
market.
like flies right now, by the way.
Exactly, it's beautiful to see. They already lost 16
Yeah.
uh, of those companies, and just like, my goodness, how big is the UK? It needs 16
Hmm.
utilities. Um, I'm actually like, I love markets. I
Hmm.
do describe myself as a neoliberal, which can be quite controversial sometimes, but I like markets that work and are functional. And I believe that power is such a part of our infrastructure for the
Hmm.
economy that there's a strong case for the state providing a stable basis for
Right.
that.
So like a
And
public
that
utility model, right?
exactly, that's what's happening in Taiwan. And you notice that we have our problems, but we're kind of missing this round of the global power crunch, because
Mm.
we have one state utility, and as the monopoly operator of power in Taiwan, they simply did the prudent thing, the
Mm.
safe thing of negotiating a lot of 20 to 25-year long leases for coal and LNG.
Mm.
And actually, those long leases, they benefit both, in my opinion, supply. Instead of things veering all over the place in the spot market, you are locked in at a certain price, and
Right.
the producers can plan their productions accordingly. And people talk about Russia being so evil and not providing the West with Europe with enough gas to last through the winter. Um, and while I admit there's some level of gamesmanship involved, and Putin is having a great time drinking Europe's chain, if you just look at it from a business perspective, how is it reasonable at all for
Hmm.
you to be like the cricket in the ant and the cricket in the summertime when gas prices are cheap, and just saying, I just want to buy cheap gas. I don't want a commitment. I just want to buy cheap gas, as cheap as gas will go. And then when gas spikes because demand has gone up and
Hmm.
you haven't prepared the producers for the demand, all of a sudden demanding that they turn on all the spigots and indeed, just give you magic gas that isn't there. It's not reasonable.
Well, and also
Um,
for them to
yeah.
serve you before they fill up their own stores, which
Yeah,
is
I know.
that's a
No,
painful lesson in energy sovereignty right there.
I think so. I think so. Babushkas gotta make sure the babushkas are warm for winter before
Yeah.
before they worry about you. And Putin is smug about it, and I believe he's strategic about it in a way that you can argue is unpleasant.
Hmm.
But the way I say it is, I remember, the Green Party lady from Germany, um, Annalisa Baum, or whatever her name is, she was accusing Putin of playing poker with gas. And I was like, lady, you guys gave up your Trump and when it comes to energy. And now you are accusing the other side of playing poker. It doesn't work like that. It's,
Yep.
it is what it is. And you don't recognize that you're the sucker. If you don't see any suckers around, you are it. And I believe that Europe is being suckered right now,
Yeah.
hard when it comes to LNG.
Yeah. I used to have this boss that would just say "sucks to suck." Um,
Sucks to suck, Europe.
yeah, but so to me, what's fascinating about what's happening in China is that state run doesn't necessarily mean public utility. It means something else is going on. They're basically turning the ship on a dime to accommodate for this. There was also, you wrote about in the article, some problems with their relationship with Australia, which I imagine was a
Yeah,
fallout from the AUKUS deal, if I remember correctly.
nope, nope,
But
nope.
no? Okay.
Actually, it is not. The Australian Chinese beef actually extended well
I
before.
mean, I know it goes way before that. I thought
Way
that might
before.
have
And
been.
also the coal problem was way before. And if anything, I think it might have precipitated the August deal.
Okay.
And most of Australia's coal going to China is actually coking coal, not thermal coal.
Okay.
But you got to understand, in a crisis like this, even every little matters, and that little bit of Australian was also a big factor. But the reasons why they cut off Australian coal was truly monumentally stupid. I believe that it has something to do with like Australians demanding an investigation into COVID, and the Chinese got insulted, and they just started banning random Australian stuff like Australian wine. No
Yeah,
Australian
retaliatory
lobsters.
tariffs and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they're not afraid. To them, that's the game they're playing, right?
Hmm.
I think that's really a lot of the times we project like, you know, malintent or evil onto other people, other states, other actors, other big corporations, whatever. But really, it's just a bunch of actors playing different games, and that's the one that China's playing. And for them, because they actually cut off themselves from a really, really key supply, right, from Australia. They have a lot of coal in China, and yeah, so they really, it really shows the planning on the economy when you also have an economy that is that complicated and that liberalized. It's like that's the strength of the Chinese economy, right? Turns on a dime. It's got all these electronic producers in the supply chain, and when that meets the rigidity of state planning and the blunt cudgel of power from up on high, there's going to be a lot of mess.
Yes, especially when it's high stake stuff like managing the grid and keeping the energy flowing, because China's grid is, I think, just one big piece and it serves like 1.1 billion people, which is astounding. Their grid operators are like living gods because that is incredible responsibility on them. And what I've been seeing is that factories in China have cut production from 5 to 6 days a week to 1 to 2, right?
Depends regionally, but you haven't heard wrong for some regions, and it has recovered. Actually, China actually also brutally punished the coal speculators. They turned on production so much. I think Chinese thermal coal prices basically crashed. So they are also able to, really. It's a double-sided sword, right? So what got them into trouble is also able to let them ramp up coal production extraordinarily effectively, which is, of course, one of those things where, okay, they solve one problem, but bye-bye ESG polls, bye-bye blue skies, Beijing 2022, and not great news for all of us, really, that are concerned about pollution, global warming. Here in China, here in Taiwan, we import, like it or not, some of the pollution because just drifts on right over the pollution.
Yeah.
Like the CO2 doesn't know national boundaries.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to basically turn to Taiwan, or just the region generally at large. So you said that Taiwan, because of its own prudence, is ducking the global energy crisis right now, more or less, compared to places like China. What is going on with Taiwan's energy future?
Okay, let's break it down to the short term and the long term. In the current energy crunch, the Taiwanese grand public are amazingly insulated from it. They barely know there's an energy problem going on worldwide because our utilities are state run. And while they still have like some of the, you can buy their stock, and they're basically state-run entities, and they can be voluntold to do a lot of things, including, I believe, the Chinese petroleum company is projected to take on a huge loss in LNG. They already have, luckily, most of their purchases in these, long contracts, like 20, 25 years. And so they're stabilized that way. But even just a little bit they're buying on the midterm, and maybe the 10% they're buying on the spot market, it's hitting them pretty hard. That's not getting passed on to the consumers in any meaningful way. Not during COVID, no way. So that's one way in which I like properly managed utilities. But unfortunately, the long-term energy policy of Taiwan, I believe, is going in a disastrous direction because it's being dictated by politicians, not professionals, not professionals in the power industry, anyhow. So President Tsai Ing-wen, who I adore in so many ways. I think she's a very smart lady, and she's done a lot of good for Taiwan on the world diplomatic stage. COVID has been managed spectacularly. Some of it is up to the Taiwanese people. Some of it is up to our institutions. But, I also believe that leadership at the top really helped. But when she came into power, she was ideologically, I believe her hands were tied on this. I don't know what her personal beliefs are at all. She was ideologically bound to her campaign promise to reduce nuclear energy to zero. And and it was one of those unfortunate things. And she chose 2025 because she's smart, and she knows that's when, for nuclear 2 and nuclear 3, basically the first 3 nuclear plants in Taiwan, they're just gonna, approach their 40-year-old end of license. And, strategically, what a great move, right? You don't have to lift the finger. You just have to not renew their license. Their license could have been renewed. It's standard of their vintage in the US to have their age extended into 60 years, into 80 years, okay? But because she's in power, it's always easier to not do something than to affirmatively do it. So she didn't do anything to affirmatively shut the plants down. She's just letting the clock run out on their time. And the 4th nuclear plant was actually mothballed under previous administration. And so she, in my opinion, says a lot of things that are very irresponsible and wrong to keep that plant closed. And that is because for her party, and although I don't know her personal beliefs, this is what she says.
Sure.
She's just completely anti-nuclear, and they've just said things that are just plain wrong. Like, we can't, those plants were left the 4th nuclear plant was left half undone. Nope, it's almost completely done, and it was mothballed with immaculate care, with 100% intention of bringing it back to use. She'll say, oh, we can't get parts for it because it is an old, decrepit technology, as if it's not built by GE Hitachi, who, the last I heard, is still alive and kicking.
Yeah, I think they're still around.
Yeah, and so it becomes this very emotional thing because, yes, the nuclear plants were built under the old authoritarian regime, and a lot of people associate them with that, and they associate them with a lot of the way things were done back then, which was real, and it becomes really emotive, right? Like, say a bunch of low-level nuclear waste got dumped in Lanyu, and it became a huge wound for the indigenous people there. Now, actually, interestingly enough, if you go to Lanyu and you measure the radioactivity, it's actually lower than in Taipei, right?
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, it's the low-level waste, right? So if it was the high-level waste, it might be a different.
It was low-level waste. It was like the buoys and whatever. But the damage was done because with nuclears, as so often in nuclear, it's not about damage done by the radiation. It's damage done through misunderstanding, fear, and in this case also disrespect towards indigenous people, right? oh, we don't want to deal with this political problem at home. Let's stash it in Orchid Island.
Mm-hmm.
And then, no, I don't want to put myself in a place of defending something that I feel like, no matter its concrete impacts, was not done in a respectful way towards indigenous
Absolutely.
peoples.
Absolutely. Yeah. I totally
Yeah,
agree
but
with that.
here's the problem though. We can say all these things about Taiwanese power. We really, really do. We already use an enormous amount of it because we're export-oriented economy,
Mm-hmm.
and it's one thing to tell people to turn the air conditioner down in the summer, or
Mm-hmm.
not leave their cell phones charging in the wall once battery's full. But when more than 60% of your electricity use is industrial, then it really becomes difficult to skimp
Mm-hmm.
on electricity usage without hurting your economic growth. And
Absolutely. Well, especially because you guys churn out so much of the world's supply of chips through TSMC.
absolutely, and those chips, they are not just they're hungry babies, and they take a well. The reason why I call them hungry babies, first of all, they do eat up so much Taiwan's electricity supply. By some measures, 10%. I don't know if that's true, but certainly 5. Just TSMC alone, one chip maker, and there are more
Wow.
chip makers in Taiwan. And they take a lot of water resources, and they are so finicky because you understand they're getting down to like a 2 nanometer node process. It is so small, and the stability of supply has to be such that any kind of any kind of fluctuation,
Yeah.
the merest shudder in voltage is going to ruin the entire batch of chips. And I believe they must be invested in their own infrastructure to make sure that they can stabilize it as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But at, let's say, like a 5 to 10% user, they're also going to have to depend on the greater stability of the grid. Yes. And assurance of supply. And that is what Taiwan doesn't have going into the future, because when I started reporting on energy last year, nuclear was still 12%. It's already down. I forgot exactly where it was at its peak. Mm-hmm. But the fourth nuclear plant itself was supposed to provide for 10% of Taiwan's electricity.
Ooh, that's a big lad.
That's a big chunk to take out of your supply.
Yeah.
Actually, 10% is about as big as you can responsibly make a piece of kit to supply your electricity. So to pull that out of the supply, you have video footage going back, 10 years, back when, they were initially talking about mothballing this thing. Yeah. And we're going to see power shortages in the 2020s. And indeed, that's exactly what happened.
Wow.
When Tsai took office in 2016, quick rewind, people did ask her, well, okay, nuclear's going to zero. Where's the juice going to come from? And I think you can always tell politicians didn't really think things through completely on a granular level if the numbers they give are very big and very round.
Yes.
And she was like 50% natural gas, 30% coal, 20% renewables. There, we just made up the whole pie. We made the pie whole again. Oh. and there's just so much to unpack in that. First of all, you cannot take away nuclear and fill it with renewables without, without something in the middle, right? Like because one is a base load and the other is a variable source. Yeah. And when I'm talking about variable, I mean there's short-term variable, solar, of course, sun doesn't shine at night, but that is actually okay. You build huge battery banks. Theoretically, you can imagine a scenario where you cover yourself throughout the night. Mm-hmm. We have interseasonal variability when it comes to wind. So the wind blows basically in the winter. And so to rely on solar and wind, it it creates problems, right? And I'm not like, anti-renewables or anything, but these
Sure.
are grid problems you have to solve. Okay, so gas, right? Gas peaker plants are supposed to solve a lot of the problems, and gas is going up to 50%. And displacing gas with coal is, again, on paper seems like better than nothing, since coal does, for the same kilowatt hour generated, emit twice as much greenhouse gases. Okay, let's do that. Except Taiwan doesn't have enough receiving structure for LNG. We have two, and they're both running at more than 100% of their supposed capacity. They've been overclocking them, and they're going to overclock them more. And even with all that overclocking that's going on, they are in the summer. We have 7-day supply maybe of liquid natural gas. So we're not talking about like, let's not even talk about a blockade scenario, like a few bad typhoons, or I don't know, a few whatever eventualities, could put Taiwan in a state of energy hunger. Coal, we have a longer term supply, maybe 2-3 months, but when you major energy mix so that it's 50% gas, you literally cannot just replace that by turning on more coal plants. There aren't that many.
Yeah.
And so that is very problematic. And also that 20% of renewable energy construction is even behind target. And there are now people raising questions, how are we going to get to that amount of installed capacity by 2025? So, and our friends, the environmentalists, are actually blocking the construction of the third natural gas terminal, and liquefied natural gas, excuse me. And yeah, it's just going to be really, really tight. So especially 2023, that's going to be a huge pinch point. The reserve capacity in the system is going to go, we try to keep it legally mandated. We're supposed to have 15% reserve capacity. It's going to go down to 12 and change. And that's the most optimistic possible scenario.
Oof. That's cutting it down to the wire. But like, one of the things I was paying attention to is what happened in Texas in February, right? Right. So they have approaching about the amount of renewables that Taiwan wants. Yeah. So it's usually
20%.
about that, around that 20% range, depending. There might be some edge cases. That's usually where the grid starts to run into some trouble. And Samsung has a silicone wafer fab in Texas.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah. And it lost like hundreds of millions.
Long time.
Yeah. And they lost like hundreds of millions of dollars, I think. And it set their production back somewhere between 30 and 60 days. Because it's not like you could just be like, oh, anyway, back to making the wafer, when you've had blackouts like that. So I think that what's becoming clear to me, and it sounds like for you too, is that there are real stakes here when we're making decisions about that, right? And about, you can't just say that certain generators of energy can do every single thing the way you want them to, when you want them to, if they aren't built to do that. That doesn't mean that they have no uses, but it does mean that you're going to have limited optionality when it comes to your plans. Yeah.
Taiwan is already doing demand response on a voluntary basis for its industry. That just means factories running off peak to smooth out the electricity supply. And that is hitting, I believe we're hitting the top of how much demand response we can do without actually affecting the economy too much. Meanwhile, new manufacturers are reshoring all the time because there's a worldwide trend to decouple from China. After all the shenanigans they pulled, people, and of course their own electricity crisis, paradoxically.
Right. I've actually been calling that their energy crunch combined with the existing supply chain issues and the manufacturing base that China has. I've been calling it the Black Cascade because they're going to
Yeah,
start to, yeah,
yeah.
it's going to start feeding into itself, you know.
That is brilliant because yeah, you're right. And also very apropos when you turn it on the Taiwanese side and people talk about the great chip shortage as if TSMC haven't been cranking out a ton of chips. It's
Yeah.
actually a huge, like unexpected boost in demand. And
Mm-hmm.
the world's main economic bodies are all doing tons of let's broadly call it easing and,
Mm-hmm.
helicopter money, stimulus, whatever you want to call it, infrastructure projects. And so all of a sudden it's like how much stimulus can the system absorb, right? Because you've just gone from everybody tightening their belts like crazy to
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden demanding this huge spike in demand. And the supply chains just stretch and broke because remember before COVID was in fashion, seems like a long time ago. This is nimble, just in time manufacturing. It's like we got this order, and then it's only as soon as we got the order, then our factories in Guangdong started to move. Then it got to JC Penney's,
Yeah,
6 weeks later.
you go through
So
like the whole
since
Kanban process, and then suddenly
exactly. And
it's right there in front of you.
you try to
Yeah.
shave off every last bit of redundancy, and it's like somebody trying to get themselves into supermodel shape, and then all of a sudden, we have a famine. It's like all that fat that was in the system was actually what's protecting it from fragility, and finding out that lesson big time. And so, yeah, I don't think manufacturing is going to completely be decoupled from China because they just have a lot of advantages, including, right, if
Yep.
we're talking about, renewable energy and stuff, all the manufacturing and resources extraction that goes on there, that's hard to replace elsewhere. So what happens is that becomes a potential boon for Taiwan because if you manufacture in Taiwan, you can still benefit from proximity to the Chinese supply chain in terms of sourcing your components. And you speak the same language, but then it's going to be made in a non-Chinese country. And that makes it much, much more attractive to American buyers. Real advantage. And yet we could be turning that advantage into a real problem if we don't have electricity we need
Yes.
to support those suppliers. And, so the government is still adamant that there is no electricity crunch issue, that they're going to just find all those kilowatt hours and the couch cushions. I'm not sure.
They're going to go to the good old kilowatt mine and dig them right out.
So it's kind of perplexing and hard to report upon. And it's also really hard, I think, on, I've had a lot of good things to say about the state-run utilities, and I think they are professionals, and I think they are the whipping boys of the politicians right now. And basically, the high power is the whipping boy of the Bureau of Energy. The Bureau of Energy is the whipping boy of the Ministry of Economic Affairs, and it doesn't stop there. It keeps on going up. And let me just say, I won't talk about it too much, but it goes up beyond the president. If you think that she is in complete control of her party, you're wrong. The political forces in Taiwan, it's very entrenched. So I really don't know. It's one of those things where I can't imagine Chinese style blackouts in Taiwan because I think it's too well managed. At the same time, the same thing that happened in China, which is she's like, I'm going to tell you to do this. No liberalization of profits, only liberalization of costs. And you have to make it happen somehow. And there was a limit to that. He could mandate it until he couldn't. And I think similar process is going to happen. You can push Thai power so much to, you got to remember, when the power cuts happened back in May, it was the Thai power executives, took demerits, like a bad schoolboy or something.
Mm.
Did they set the energy policy? They didn't set the energy policy. But what blackouts happen when things don't go right, then it's their responsibility. How is that fair? It's not fair. And they can't say anything about it unless they're retired, and they get very, very loud.
Well, yeah, many such cases of that.
Many such cases.
Yeah, many such cases. Well, I guess we live in interesting times, and we'll have to see how this unfolds. I really want to thank you for taking time out of your day to explain all of this. I learned so much. This was really, really helpful. And I can't wait for the episode to come out.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. And thanks for doing what you do. I love your whole branding. I love your whole attitude. I love your ethos and you being strategic in putting it all together. And I think we need to be based on this. I think we need to be based when it comes to nuclear. One thing I do want to mention before we wrap up,
please,
is that there is a referendum to restart the 4th nuclear plant. So that bad boy.
Amazing.
Mothballed, but not gone forever. And remember what I said about Taipower executives, becoming very vociferous once they've retired? The former director of the mothball 4th nuclear plant. Remember, a whole generation of Taiwanese nuclear engineers, their life is spent. Some of them started their careers building the 4th nuclear plant, then maintaining it, then mothballing it, then maintaining the pod. That's their whole career. He was very vociferous about the 4th nuclear plant being able to be restarted, that there are parts that it was probably mothballed and can be brought back. He gave timelines, and I think together with what we observed in China and also our own problems in May, I think it's moving the needle. And the latest polls are showing just narrowly that the referendum on December 18th to restart the 4th nuclear plant might actually pass. So any listeners out there, if you know anybody in Taiwan, even if you don't know anybody in Taiwan, just find some Taiwanese, go online, find some Taiwanese person and just tell them that nuclear power is safe, Taiwan needs it, and you support them. Tell them Taiwan is a country. Taiwanese people love that. Say, hey, Taiwan is a country, nuclear power is good, go vote in the referendum.
Okay, barbarians, you have your marching orders. You know what to do. So, again, thank you, Angelica, and everyone else.
Thank you, Emmett.
Stay safe, stay sharp, and stay radiant. We'll see you next time.